I'm entitling this message, The Unspoken Part of Child Training. And you'll learn more and more about what I mean by that. Essentially, we have our best interest in mind. We read the Proverbs. We have all these verses on our walls. Train up a child in the way he should go, and discipline your child while there's hope. And all of those verses help us, and they equip us to do the job. And we do what we can, the best we can, with our family. And we want to look at some of the outcomes of that as we go along here today. Just to start, I want to read a scripture here, and I'm entitling this Generational Knowledge. And that is knowledge that's passed through generations, through children and through the parents. And I'm in Psalm 78, and I'm just going to read a few verses out of this beautiful psalm. He established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers to teach their children. Now, try to add up the generations as we go here. That the next generation might know them, the children yet unborn, and arise and tell them to their children, so that they should set their hope in God, not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments, and that they should not be like their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation whose heart was not steadfast, whose spirit was not faithful to God. So right there, that verse, one thing it tells you is don't be like your dad if he wasn't godly. If he wasn't doing what he should be, then you need to set a new course. And we'll look at that in more detail in just a moment. But how many generations there? I count 4 generations. My father teaches me to teach my children that's going to teach the children yet unborn. The responsibility of the transfer of knowledge of God is with the parents. Children aren't just going to wake up one morning and know about everything. They have to be taught. And that's true of every child. They're basically, in that sense, they're a blank slate. One thing you read about a lot in the Old Testament is the Red Sea crossing. That was a big deal. That was part of their history. And they're always telling their children about, well, remember when God delivered us through the waters, he dried up the waters. They're always talking about that fantastic event. So these children can get it in their heads. And if they get it enough, they're going to eventually tell their children that same story, and the same story, and the same story. So the generational knowledge occurs in the family, transferring the knowledge of God to the next generation. That is a huge responsibility of parenting. Getting your children to eat their peas is one thing, but how about getting them to love God and to know about God? That's key. We got to focus on that. That's got to be in there way up on the list. And here's another passage, Deuteronomy 6:6-7. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. Isn't that amazing? Is that like all the time? Does that sound like all the time to you? It does to me. You see any Sunday school class in there? No? Nothing wrong with Sunday school classes. That's one other opportunity. This is all home life. This is the day-to-day. Now, a lot of children were home. Maybe their parents were farmers, so the dad was home working in the fields and all of that. And maybe in our generation today, the mom might be home all the time while the dad's at work. That's the traditional method. But whatever it is, this teaching and this generational knowledge has to be a constant thing. And these are what we call teachable moments. You got to find some throughout the day. If you're ever with your kids, like gardening is really good. You're planting your seeds there in the garden, and you can say just, hey, the Bible, Jesus said that unless a seed falls into the ground and dies, it abides alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Great opportunity to teach a little gospel message there while you're planting corn. All right, teachable moment. All kinds of things. You can do it in mechanics. You can do it in anything you're doing. You can find a metaphor of what you're experiencing and turn it into a lesson for them. Jesus did it all the time. Consider the lilies of the field. Just his whole life was a big metaphor of teaching everything he sees and relating it to the kingdom of God somehow. He was really good at that. And we need to be too. Teachable moments are key. So this is generational knowledge. You're going to transfer your knowledge. I'm a first generation Christian, so is my wife. And so we didn't have any past anything in the background. We're starting fresh. And so our children have been given a certain amount of knowledge. Incomplete, I'm sure. Example, incomplete, I'm sure. But you got to start somewhere, right? And so my expectation is that they're going to grab that and run with it. And their children are going to teach their children. And hopefully it'll go on, generation after generation after generation. That's the idea. But there's not just generational knowledge. There's a generational influence. And this is part of the unspoken part of child training. Here's my question. How much does my upbringing affect me? Now, some of you may not be fathers or mothers or have children, but this particular part of this message is for you as well. How does my upbringing affect me? And as a parent, I would say, how does it affect my parenting? How do I see my children, and how are the experiences that I grew up with, the home life and the conversations and whatever it was, good or bad, how does that affect me today? Does it affect me, or am I just starting out fresh? I want to read a very interesting and kind of concerning verse here. And this is Numbers 14:18. You might want to write that down. This same thought, almost word for word, occurs 3 or 4 different other places in Deuteronomy and Exodus. Here it is, Numbers 14:18. The Lord is long-suffering and of great mercy, forgiving iniquity and transgression. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? I love that. That's who God is. But look at it, it doesn't end there. And by no means clearing the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the 3rd and 4th generation. Whoa. What in the world does that mean? One translation for this visiting the iniquity, it says, lays the sins of parents on their children. Another translation, the NIV, says, punishes children for sins of their parents. Huh? You could say, well, that's the old covenant. We're glad that's all gone. No, this is the Word of God. We have to deal with this verse somehow, and I'm going to. I'm going to bring in another passage of Scripture that's going to help, so don't despair here. We're going to find out what this verse means. It has to mean something for us. There's something here for us, something very powerful. Now I'm reading a portion of Ezekiel 18. And everybody ought to know a little bit about Ezekiel 18. If you don't know anything about Ezekiel, and you may not, chapter 18 is amazing. And it's talking about, guess what, fathers and sons. And I'm just jumping in at verse 14 here, and I'm going to skip through a couple of verses, but I've got the context in. It's talking about a father who was not a believer, maybe, or at least didn't do a good job as a dad, didn't raise the children properly, don't know exactly what. But it says in verse 14, now suppose this man, that's that father, fathers a son who sees all the sins that his father has done. He sees and does not do likewise. He didn't follow the example. He, that is the son who sees and does not do likewise, he shall not die for his father's iniquity. He shall surely live. Jumping down to verse 19, yet you say, why should not the son suffer for the iniquity of the father? Here's the answer. When the son has done what is just and right, has been careful to observe all my statutes, he shall surely live. The soul who sins shall die. And here's the wrap up. The son shall not suffer for the iniquity of the father, nor the father suffer for the iniquity of the son. So what does Numbers 14 and 18 possibly mean? Visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children under the 3rd and 4th generation. The only possible interpretation based on what I just read is that Numbers 14 speaks about the effects of a father's influence on their son or their daughter, or the mother's influence. That effect can transfer for generations if you let it. Remember, there's one son, he saw what was going on, and he says, no, I'm not going there. That's not the kind of dad I'm going to be. So he made a change. He made a choice. That's the only way to interpret that. That the effects of the iniquity of the parents, or their lack of parenting, maybe iniquity is a strong word for you, but they just didn't get it done. And the way they were has affected me somehow or other. Poor role model, or maybe a bad example of behavior, could be that. But it's clear from what we just read that no one, and I just want to make it absolutely clear, no one is ever judged or punished by God for the sins of someone else. Nobody, no matter who it is. Adam, your father, your neighbor, nothing. Everybody stands on their own. The son, it says, shall not suffer for the iniquity of the father, nor the father for the iniquity of the son. They're completely insulated from one another. Romans 14 says, each one will give an account of himself to God. We stand alone before our Creator. But there is an undeniable influence that your parents have left upon you. We can't get away from it. It's true of everyone listening to this message at some level. Could be a very positive influence that's going to affect you. Or, unfortunately, it could be a negative influence, and probably a mixture of the two. Well, obviously, genetically, we're like our parents. Could be your nose or your ears or your whatever. We can't get away from that. But what about in our mannerisms? The way we approach things. I'll give you an example. I remember my brother, this shows you kind of my age here. We had these things on the top of our house called antennas. And on your TV, you had a box with a big knob on it, and it said north, south, east, and west. And depending on the kind of channel you wanted to watch, and there were only 3 to choose from, so depending on where you lived, I should say, you would have to turn the antenna to point in the direction of that signal. And we've come a long way, right? But that's how it was. So my dad's sitting there smoking a cigarette and drinking a beer in his chair, and my brother, who was 3 years older than me, they didn't get along real well. They competed with one another quite often. All of a sudden, the TV would go static or something, and then my dad would say, well, there you go, Michael. You did it. And maybe he was joking, but he did it in a critical manner, Just the way he operated, throwing out little insults here and there, maybe to help justify himself. Who knows? I'm not a psychologist. Well, what if my daughter spills her drink for the 3rd time, which has happened, the same daughter? Am I going to go, well, there you go again? Is that how I'm going to act? And if I did, who would I be acting like? I'd be acting like my dad, throwing out a little insult here. Yeah, you're probably going to do that again sometime. Is this how we're going to operate? Working off of the bad example of my father or mother? Well, you could. And I check myself sometimes and find out, no, that's what I heard growing up. That's the kind of conflicts that we had, the kind of arguments and things like that. Or how about this? When things get a little dicey in the family conversation, which I think they all have, I know for sure in this room there's been some dicey conversation amongst family members. Do you get up and leave the room like my dad would do? My mom's dad would be over. He was a general in the National Army Guard. He was a general, actually a general with stripes. He'd come over. My dad was a salesman, and they'd get into a discussion about business and things. This happened all the time. And sure enough, my dad would get up from the dinner table and sit back out in his chair in the living room and probably crack open another beer, right? How do you deal with stress? Am I going to leave the room when things aren't working well? Do you see my point here? We have been influenced by our parents in many ways, and we have to watch out for it. And we need to improve upon it, perhaps, of that example. Just like that son, what did it say? He saw what was done, and he didn't do likewise. He said, that's not how I'm going to operate. And that's this generational influence in a positive way. You can, and I hope my children will refine all the idiosyncrasies of me. and check out. No, not like that. And I'm going to focus on that. That was a quality I liked in him and her. And so pretty soon these generations become more and more refined, operating in a more godly way. That's what we want to see. There was a history of alcoholism in my family. My father's dad died of sclerosis of the liver. My dad was affected by alcoholism as well. I do not drink alcohol. Duh, right? Why would I? I'm not saying, I'm not making a statement about drinking. I'm just saying the truth. Because for me, no way, Jose. Not going to do it. Why would I? As a Christian, I received Christ at the age of 23. Here's a little personal testimony. I had to learn some things, obviously. I love watching Christian families and children in a Christian family develop. They have such a beautiful context to grow up in. The Word of God is preached, love of the parents, church, fellowship, all these things are perfect and proper and wonderful. But as a Christian, I had to learn some things. I had to learn, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. 2 Corinthians 5:17. I had to learn to put off the old man, which is corrupt. Ephesians 4:22. I had to learn that Jesus came to give life and to give it more abundantly. John 10. Got to learn these things as a new Christian, growing up in a context which isn't exactly ideal. Lifestyles, habits, missed opportunities. You could look back, reflect a little bit. What if this, if only that? All of that stuff doesn't matter anymore if you're in Christ. No matter when you got in Christ. Maybe as a young child, maybe as a 23-year-old. Thankfully, my dad trusted the Lord when he was 74 and a half. Okay? And that's wonderful. Romans 6:4 says that we should walk in newness of life. And so as a parent, influenced by your parents, you need to sort out certain things that you're no longer going to walk in. And you can do it. God empowers you to do it. He wants you to refine your steps to become more and more close to what he wants, regardless of how you were brought up. Is this easy? No. Is it going to take a lifetime? Perhaps, progressively, but we have to do it. Now, I talk about a lifetime. Well, there's a progression there. And I want to talk a little bit now about the progression of child training. One thing I've learned through this study and through our Bible study we had last week talking about it, there are what I call the early years of obedience. Remember my analogy of the tool bag? Everybody's got a tool bag with all the tools they need for whatever they need to do. And your tool bag is your child training tool bag. And you've got all kinds of things in there. You got screwdrivers and pliers and hammers and measuring tape and all of that. It's all in there. Do you use everything all the time? No, you have to choose the tool that's appropriate. And in the beginning years, this is a little review now, the early years of obedience, that's all you're looking for. We're not looking for a conversation or a debate. We're looking for obedience. This is early years, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe all the first 5 years is a good ballpark for this. Don't touch that. You said it this morning. Go there. Go to bed. Eat your food. These are pretty simple, right? And then there's consequences if they don't obey. This is how you teach obedience. You get that little spanking tool out of your tool bag. If they didn't obey, they need to know. And we talked about that and how it's done and how it shouldn't be done and all of those things. It's biblical. So those early years, you're looking for that obedience. You don't want to break anybody's spirit like my dad might have tried to do, but you do want to break their will. You want their will to be your will, that when you say something, it's going to happen. And that's training. This is going to be repetitive. It has to go maybe multiple visits. until they finally get it. That's what you're looking for. But then later, you have the later years of influence, not obedience necessarily, but influence. And that's different kinds of instruction at that point. I can't tell my 12-year-old, go to bed. They're probably going to say, but it's only 7 o'clock. We're going to have to talk about things a little bit. No, or stand in the corner. That's not going to happen, because they're not that pliable anymore. They've got ideas about things. But that doesn't mean anything goes or they get their way. It's just you're going to use different forms of discipline and instruction to get the point across. And I talk about the years of influence. The way that they're going to do the things you're asking them to do in the context of their age is because of the influence that you've had in their life up to that point. Remember that. And that was that bank account analogy. Every time you have a relationship and you're working with your son and you're doing things and maybe letting them do things and giving permission, you're investing in a savings account that when you finally do step in to stop something, like I said, you can't go to the party tonight, okay? They're going to not like that, but they're going to listen to you because they know you. Do you know your son and daughter? How well do you know them? How well do you know their friends? All of those things. The years of influence. Ephesians 6:2 hasn't been covered in this study, but I think we missed it. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with you, and you may live long upon the earth. Did you know that honoring your parents is one of the 10 commandments? Baseline. Don't steal, don't envy, don't murder, honor your parents. It's all on the same level. Basic stuff. And what happens when you do honor your parents? Well, it's well with you. It goes well with you. And that's what you want. Now, for adolescents, honor is a higher thing than obedience. I can get a child to obey, and I've seen this even in the context of the people I'm talking to. They tell someone to do something, say sit down. Well, they sit down, but their face expression tells me they're still standing up. They go, You haven't accomplished the goal yet. But what about honor? Honoring your parents is a very high thing. It's putting them in a certain position that can't be changed, no matter who they are, including my dad. Honoring your parents. For adolescents and older children, even out of the home, that's going to be a choice based on the kind of parent you are. That's the level of honor that you'll get. That's kind of heavy, isn't it, dads, moms? They'll reflect through the rest of their life and honor you depending on, as a response, I guess the level of honor, I should say. You should honor your parents, period, because we're commanded to do it. But that level of that depth of honor, I'll say, is going to be based on the type of parent we are. One more story about my dad and me. I think I was in high school, and he asked me, I don't know if he asked me or told me, I can't remember how it all got started, but I had to mow the grass, okay? Not a big deal, right? You do have to mow the lawn. I was so mad, maybe it kept me from doing something I wanted to do. I was so mad that I started mowing the grass. We had a push mower, and I'm banging this push mower around. I'm as mad as I can be. Well, I'm mowing the grass, but I am not honoring my father, you know? So there's a difference between obedience and honor, and we want honor. We want honor, and the Bible commands it. And so all of you that are children of parents, and everybody is, honor your father and mother. And it will be well with you. What a wonderful promise that is. Well, we did look at God as a father, and you remember we looked at that beautiful passage in Hebrews 12, which you ought to be familiar with. And there it looks at how God disciplines his children. And it's a great example for all of us fathers. He disciplines those he loves, it says, and he disciplines us for our good. So anytime, and just to expand on the thought there, anytime something enters your life, if you're a Christian, a believing Christian, that is not what you asked for, or a disappointment of some kind, or something that wasn't, or even a blessing, all of it comes from a Father who loves you and wants your good. And we just have to always chalk it up as that. If we don't understand things, that's always your go-to line. Well, he loves me and he disciplines me for my good. So whatever is happening right now, I'm going to get through it because he's in it and with me through it. But look at some of the verses about the outcome of some of God's children. And this gets into a little bit more of the unspoken part of child training. Malachi 1:6. God speaking here. A son honoreth his father, and a servant his master. If I then be a father, where's my honor? And if I be a master, where is my fear? God's speaking to his children. And he's saying, now listen, I've been good to you. I've loved you. Where's my honor? Where's my fear? You're going off and doing your own thing. You're rebellious children. Isaiah 1:2. Hear, O heavens, give ear, O earth, for the Lord has spoken. I've nourished and brought up children, and they've rebelled against me. That's what God says. Now, how good of a father is God? Oh, he's the perfect father. Perfect. Perfect in character, his example, his methods, everything is timely, appropriate. Remember, we don't want to discipline in an inappropriate way or at the wrong time or the wrong amount. God, none of that. It's always perfect. And yet, there's an outcome here that's not what it should be. I mentioned Ephesians 6:4 last week. Fathers, provoke not your children to wrath. Oh, we can do that? We can make my children so mad that they're going to be banging the lawnmower out in the front yard, making a fool out of themselves? I guess so. We have to be careful. The reality is that parents can contribute to unfortunate outcomes in their children's life. You can have some responsibility there, but like we read in Ezekiel, there's no connection there. Everyone stands on their own. My dad's not going to be judged for my outburst, okay? And I'm not going to be judged for his bad example at times. Even as God is a perfect father, his children can drift away from his parenting. And I want to show some examples of God's children. Here's a little history lesson on the kings of Judah. I'm sure you're all waiting for it. Now, you know the children of Israel were divided at one point. 10 tribes were called the northern kingdom, and 2 tribes were in the southern kingdom. And the kings in the southern tribe are a great study. One is called Ahaz. And he was 22 years old when he reigned, and he reigned for 16 years. And it says about Ahaz that he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel. And that's never a good thing to know. The kings of Israel were into idolatry. They were into all kinds of the things of the nations around them. They weren't godly. They didn't care. They had their own little religious system set up. He made images to Baal, the god of other nations. Terrible king. And he reigned 16 years. He had a son named Hezekiah. Had many sons, but the firstborn, Hezekiah. He was 25 years old when he began to reigned 29 years. Hezekiah is considered one of the greatest, most godly, effective kings that the southern kingdom ever had. And who's his dad? Ahaz. How much can you be influenced by your parents? Apparently, Hezekiah made some choices along the way. Now, I don't know. We don't know any of the details. All I know is that Ahaz had a son named Hezekiah. Hezekiah reinstituted the Passover feasts. It says on the first month of the first year of his reign, he opened the doors of the temple, reinstituted worship, tore down all the Asherim and the Baals and all the statues, and got everything in order. Good old Hezekiah. What a great king he was. Well, he had a son. This is all progressive now. I'm not skipping anything. He had a son, and his name was Manasseh. And if you know your Bible at all, you'll know that Manasseh is considered the worst of all the kings, even the kings of the north. Manasseh outdid everybody in terms of evil. He reigned 55 years. He was the longest reigning king in the southern kingdom. And he did everything wrong. Thankfully, he trusted God later in his life in captivity. That's another story. But during his reign, this is Hezekiah's son again. Now, you see what I'm painting here, this picture. Manasseh, terrible king, so bad that God said, okay, that's it. You're going to go to captivity eventually. And they did. Well, he had a son named Ammon who only reigned 2 years. And he was just like his dad, chip off the old block. Good old Manasseh, just like his dad. Ammon had a son, and this is my last one, so we're done, named Josiah. And if you had some competition about who the best king was, it'd be either Hezekiah or Josiah. I personally vote for Josiah for a couple of reasons. He was 8 years old when he began to reign, reigned 31 years. It says at 16 he began to tear down the altars of Baal. He got busy. He got so busy, he found out where the bones of the high priests were that were evil, and he dug them up and ground them in a powder and burned them up. He was like on his game. He also got the Passover started. What do we have here? We have a crazy, unpredictable outcome of fathers and sons. That's what you have. Got Ammon had Hezekiah. Wow. Hezekiah had Manasseh. Oh, maybe he was too busy being a king. I don't know the answers here. Ammon, and then Ammon had Josiah. How can this happen? Could it happen to us? Could we have unfortunate outcomes in spite of our best training? Sure. Sure you could. It does happen. Why does it happen? That's what we want to drill down to as parents now. I would say, from my experience and just seeing things for a little while, the most common cause of these sort of outcomes are outside influences from the home. Outside. Stuff happening out there. When you got your little ones in the house, there isn't any out there. You're in charge of everything. You're in charge of all their behavior, their mannerisms, their thought life, everything. You're painting the picture for them, and you should. And you should do it as long as you can, I would say. We homeschooled our children. Homeschooling is hard for some people. We were able to do it, at least do it in the early years, in the very early years, when it's easy. They don't have to go to elementary school. They don't have to go to preschool. They can stay home, and you can just have as many days as you can with them in that safe, secure thing we call home and family. But once they get out a little bit, they have friends. They have bosses and coworkers. And you don't know who these people are, and you don't know what their worldview is. But they're influencers. All of them are. College roommates. Oh boy, had a few of those. Or just the world system itself is a corrupting influence. The Bible says so. Peter calls it the corruption that's in the world through lust. And lust is not just a sexual thing. Lust is just an excessive desire for something. Could be purpose, or could be money, or power, or any number of things. But the world just has it out there, dangling it in front of us. And when our children get out there and start interacting with this world, they can become corrupted by it if they're not careful, and if they don't have the thought pattern they should. We have to tell our children at some age in the adolescence of what this world is. And boy, today you need to tell them a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't in my vocabulary when I had little children. You have to tell them about transgenderism, and you have to tell them about communism, and you have to tell them about stuff because it's out there. And it's what we heard this morning. It's shooting in the dark, looking for the righteous one. Take them out somehow. Satan is called the prince of the world. He's in charge of things. But God will use everything, even the world system, to discipline and correct us and bring us to a better place. But we want to equip our children to live in this world. You know, I know a family, a good family, a lot of children, homeschooled their kids, and then one of the girls got a job somewhere and ended up running off with the night manager. You know, it's like, what? They make choices. They're willful. They got an attitude. They want to do what they want to do. And hopefully, through good parenting and God's influence and prayer and diligence in training that will never happen. And it hardly ever does. But it does sometimes. And that's part of the unspoken part of child training. Now I want to finish up here with a familiar story, which certainly goes along with what we're talking of, and it's the story about the prodigal son. But I want to add some things in that aren't in the story. So I think we all know more or less the story of the prodigal son. You got a father, has two sons, no mention of the mother there, but maybe she was in the background. And one of the sons says to his dad, I want my inheritance now, not I don't want to wait till later. So his dad gives it to him. And then it says, I think it's 3 days later, he leaves home. I don't know if that was a surprise or what. But now he's got the inheritance, he's got a cell phone and a credit card and a driver's license, right? And he's out. He leaves the house. And then it says he spent his money on riotous living. He went out and hooped it up, did whatever he did. We don't know all the details, don't want to know. He left that structure and the safety of his home and apparently his good father. I think he was a good father because of what happens later. And he sowed his wild oats, as the saying goes. He lived in the pleasures of sin for a season. But seasons always change, don't they? And the fun of summer can drift into the shorter days of fall, which end up in the dark nights of winter. Seasons do change, always. And for this man, they did. It's part of the day-to-day. Remember how I told you God's always disciplining his children? Well, he was right there. Psalm 139, whither shall I go from thy spirit? He was right there with that prodigal son. Moment by moment. Now, when the money runs out, you find out what the world's all about. If you don't have a support system, if you don't have people in your life that are going to care for you and love you, if you don't have parents, if you don't have godly friends, if you're just out there on your own and you got a bankroll, fine, you'll make it for a while. But when the money runs out and there's no one there to help, that's when you find out what the world's all about. It's not a happy place. It's cold and empty. And it happened to him. And it didn't take long in that situation for him to start to reflect a little bit on what he had, what his family was all about. Sin can make you thirsty, can it? The world can make you thirsty for something better. And he thought about it. And you know the line, he said, man, my father's servants have it better than I have it right now. And you know that he was so hungry that he got a job with a pig farmer, called up my son who's got some hogs out there and says, hey, would you pay me to feed your pigs? Now to a Jew, you know, that's the ultimate. You've reached bottom at that point. When you're so hungry you want to eat pig food, then there's no, you can't go lower than that. He was at the end of the rope, bottom of the barrel. And he starts to reflect. What does he reflect on? The good times of his home. That's why we have to create those times. We have to have a home that's going to leave those kind of memories. We have to have those activities. We have to have that kind of love that when somebody like this prodigal son decides to do what he's going to do, that there is a lasting influence. And maybe that's what Proverbs 22 is all about. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. Well, maybe it won't depart from him. Maybe that's a better application there. That whatever you put in, remember those investments, the bank account, that's in there. And later on, if things go a little sour, there's something in that account he can draw from. Well, what I want to add in here is what's going on in the background of this story. We don't know. We don't know. But as a father, I can tell you that in spite of the situation, there was the love of the father and the mother. That never changed. That's the kind of people you have to be. You love your children like God does, right? He disciplines us because he loves us. And then there were prayers of everyone who knew about the situation. Now, maybe I'm speaking to somebody who's in this situation, and I just want to encourage you to let other people know about what's going on. Easy to keep these things private so we don't look bad. Let people know what's happening. Why? The prayer of effectual prayer of a righteous man avails much. How about righteous men and women, as many as you can get? Get a prayer list a mile long and pray and pray and pray. That's what was going on behind the scenes at home. I'm sure it was. And then this amazing line in the whole story, and I love it. It says, he came to his senses. The lights came on. How did that happen? Well, I believe there was divine intervention because of all that came before, the love of the parents and the prayers to God for help, for him to correct the situation. And I've been thinking about this myself. You know, it says the Lord, in the book of Acts, this woman named Lydia, it says the Lord opened her heart. That's interesting, isn't it? You know why I think he opened her heart? Because she was praying to know more about God. She was at a prayer meeting, actually. And the Lord answered her prayer with a fuller revelation of himself. He opened her heart. Pray that the Lord will open the heart of this prodigal. That's what his father did. I'm sure he did. That's why things happen. Prayer changes things, like we like to say. Or pray, Lord, draw him to yourself in a unique way, in something that will shock him or her in a way that is unexpected. Do something outrageous, if that's what it takes. It's good to pray these things. Pray that God will discipline him in every way possible. Remember? The tool bag, mercy's in there, right? Discipline's in there. Remember that word, paideia? The whole training. Positive reinforcement, encouragement, discipline, spankings, it's all in there. It's all in the context of training. And God is training his children. And unfortunately, this situation that has occurred with this prodigal son is going to become part of God's training. It's going to become an integral part of his life. And we know it's a happy ending, right? He comes to his senses. He goes home. His dad sees him from a distance. It's all good. Gives him the robe and the fatted calf and all of that. It all turned out well. Amen. That was great. It's a beautiful story. And it's so true that all of these things can affect the outcome, which is not what you wanted as a parent. And so we need to trust God in these things and do the things we're supposed to do as we wait patiently for him to rectify the situation through the hearts of these ones, whoever they might be. So I hope maybe someone is experiencing that and that this would be a help. Well, we've talked about the family in a lot of different ways. And the family is God's thing, to travel through the world in this family. It's wonderful. And it has all these components. It has marriage and the roles of mom and dad and the training of children and the bringing them up and the nurture and admonition of the Lord as we studied. And training is not just for little children. Remember, you're always training your children. I am training my children now. I'm 67. I'm still training them the way I react to things and how I work with them and how many phone calls I make and whether I'm concerned about what's going on or I find out what's going on. You know, because a lot of stuff is happening over behind the scenes. I don't know about everything. But every now and then I'll hear a little something from somebody and I'll have to step in and kind of get in there and work with things. And so you're always training your children. All the way through the rest of your life you will be. And as they grow older, your relationship, I hope this is just one of the things that you get out of these messages. Your relationship is the foundation for their behavior. Who you are becomes a baseline for them. I want to be like my dad. I want to be like my mom. Hopefully you will hear that. That's what you want to hear. And then most importantly, God is working through our actions. We're a tool in his tool bag. And the things that we do, He is going to accomplish His will through me, through you, through the parents, to work His will into this child. And that's a good thing to know, that He's there working through you and through your actions and giving you wisdom and discernment about what to do and when to do. It's hard. It's really hard to know everything. I mean, what do we know to start? It's OJT from day one. I mean, you have a couple of examples of other people, but you're going to have to make day-to-day or minute-to-minute decisions about what to do for these children to be consistent. So I would just say, love your children like God loves you. Mold them, discipline them, correct them, and they will bring joy to your heart. And they will bring blessings to God, that He sees the fruit of the womb is truly His reward. And then ultimately, as we've talked about bows and arrows today, you know that verse, that He gives you these children, and they're like arrows in the hands of a mighty warrior. And we know what arrows have to do. They have to be straight and true in order to accomplish their objective. And that's what God wants for our children. And the objective there in that verse is that they'll speak with their enemies in the gate, that you'll perpetuate this testimony of God throughout generations and generations and generations until the Lord comes for His people.